Yeah. Bills Mafia. Don Brown. Yeah. It's the Mafia, you know I'm rocking with the Bills. It's the Mafia, you know I'm rocking with the Bills. It's the Mafia, I'm with the Buffalo Bills. It's the Mafia, you know I'm rocking with the Bills. Hey, who you reppin', what's your team? Who you reppin', what's your team? You know I'm reppin' for my team. I got that talent on my team. Micah High,
Bills
Jordan
Mafia,
Boy,
what is up? And welcome into the Thursday edition of the Bills Brawl. Yes, it is your host, Charlie Gross, and I am here with the co-host, E.J. Daniels. E.J., how you doing?
I'm good, man. Happy to have another opportunity to speak to Bills Mafia.
Yeah, me too. And I know we got a lot to talk about with the Super Bowl just ending. And I think we got a lot of thoughts on what the Bills can do to beat the Chiefs in the future from what we saw. But before we get into that, I just have to once again remind people that we are now part of the Bills Brawl. And I would like to thank Mike Brez and the Brawl Network for bringing us in. You will be hearing us every Thursday in your Bills Brawl feed. Mike Lindsley also has a show that I believe is coming out on Tuesdays, so I encourage you to check that out. We are going to be having a lot more guests, I think, coming up. We're going to have some fans on. We're going to have some draft guys on. We're going to have some other podcasters on. We're going to have some Bills beat writers on. Probably might try to get some players on. So I encourage all of you to tune into the Bills Brawl. I encourage you to follow the Brawl Network. It's an absolutely great place with a lot of great people involved in the process. And with that said, Mafia, let us get into the Super Bowl. As you know, Tom Brady has won his 7th Super Bowl, which I don't really care about because he's not in the AFC East anymore. So, EJ, what were your overall thoughts, maybe just on the game, real quick, and then we'll dive into what we saw and maybe what the Bills can do to beat the Chiefs next year.
First off, the game kind of went the way I thought it was. I want to start on the defensive side. So I was listening to the PFF podcast, right? And he said, this is what he said. He said, the Chiefs have been getting average pass blocking pretty much all year. So what makes a difference if they take 2 average tackles and put 2 less than average tackles in there, for the Super Bowl, right? So I was like, that is literally the prime example of overanalyzing, because as you saw during that game, they had Shaq Barrett on one side, and Ndamukong Suh and Vita Vea in the middle, and then they had JPP on the other side. And you saw the havoc that they wreaked on those less than average tackles. To counter off of his point, I mean, clearly it matters if a less than average tackles go against above average D ends and D linemen. That matters. That's my first takeaway. And as you saw, Mahomes was under pressure all night. Literally. And then on those last 2 drives, he took like 2 of the worst hits I've ever seen him take. And then on the offensive side, it kind of went the way I thought it was going to go. They ran the ball a lot. And it was I told people it was a Brady-type game. A lot of runs, a lot of play action, quick passes, getting the ball out, not really holding it too long. Brady did what he was supposed to do. And I have bet against Brady in the NFC Championship, and I was not betting against Brady in the Super Bowl.
And I was kind of on the fence like last year. I was kind of those, Tom Brady is maybe not as good as he was. But, man, he keeps chugging along, And you're right. I mean, Mahomes got smoked on that one hit. I mean,
all night, yeah.
Yeah, and I understand sort of the concept was that you were talking about that you heard on the other podcast. But, right, at some point, the next man up just – isn't the same. That's why he's the next man up and not the man. Yeah, I mean, I was kind of surprised at first. I don't want to say they made it look easy. I'm sure it wasn't easy for them on the field, but they made it look pretty easy. And you and I were just talking about this tweet from Bucky Brooks. He retweeted ESPN's Next Gen Stats, I believe, and a little heat map here of – or no, it's the NFL Next Gen Stats. I'm sorry. A little heat map here of where the Bucs lined up on defense. And Bucky Brooks in his retweet said Tampa Bay utilized a plan that was very similar to the ones used by the Bills. They parked the safeties near the end zone and forced Mahomes to throw versus max coverage in a 4-man rush. Tampa Bay is just faster, more talented, and executed the plan better. What are your thoughts about that?
Let me start in the first part. So they did park their safeties really far back. My dad, when we were watching the Super Bowl, right, he was yelling like, the safety's got to come up, because if you remember those first couple drives, Mahomes had took off for a couple yards for like 2 or 3 first downs, and he's like, the safety's got to come up and help. They got to come. I said they can't help. I said they can't. They literally cannot come up and help, because if they do, Tyreek's going to take the top right off the defense. I said they can't come up and help. So he's right about that. So the difference between the Bills plan and the Tampa Bay's plan, I want Bills Mafia to hear me. This is the difference between the two plans. The Bucs have way better athletes at DB than the Bills do. And I've been saying this for the past month now. That is the difference. They have invested 7 draft picks into DBs the last 2 or 3 drafts. So Antoine Winfield Jr. is a young stud. Murphy Bunting, Dean, Davis, and I forgot the other safety's name. I think it's Edwards or MJ Stewart, one of the other ones. I can't remember the other safety, but he was also a high draft pick. So they have invested for a time such as this. So when it's this young speed against the Chiefs speed, coupled with the fact that, their front four is wreaking havoc all night on Mahomes, now you have a recipe for success. And to take it to the Bills side, it's the fact that the Bills don't have a great pass rusher besides Jerry Hughes. The Bills have 1 and Tampa Bay has 4. So again, to go back to my previous point, the Bucs have better, like he said, the Bucs just generally have better athletes than what the Bills have. And that's why their plan worked and the Bills didn't.
I would agree with that. And I think the last time we talked, you had mentioned your feelings on Trey White, and that maybe he's closer to, I think maybe the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th corner than obviously the best corner in the league. And I thought a lot about that, because at first I kind of disagreed with you.
As everyone else in Bills Mafia who hops on my back because I say that.
Right. And I think the Bills have approached things defensively kind of like they're trying to win with technique.
Yes. And
that's not bad necessarily, but in today's NFL, I mean, like you said, you've got to have athletes.
You gotta have athletes,
right? And that kind of brings me, as I was watching the Super Bowl, I'm watching Tampa, and these things pop into my head, and I'm saying to myself, man, the Bills are going to need a better pass rush. And then I'm thinking, the Bills are going to need to run the ball a little bit better. The Bills are going to need to be more physical at the line with these Kansas City receivers. And then the last thing, and we'll get to all this is, Josh needs to be more like Tom Brady and just take these checkdowns and stuff. But I think you're right. I think the Bills defense, I think they need more athletes on pretty much every level. And I get your point about DBs, and I know like the Chiefs run the 4-1-6, and they've got great DBs as well, young physical guys. But there's certainly the Bills could use a little more juice on the defensive line too.
They can use a little juice, like you said, everywhere on that defense. And then I want to make a point about Levante David. So what Levante David, even though Kelsey had 10 catches for 133 yards, what Levante David did against Kelsey was what Milano was supposed to do against Kelsey. That was what Milano was supposed to do. Now, Levante David has been one of the best coverage linebackers since he's been in the league, grading over 90. Kelsey's a great tight end. He's probably one of the greatest in the NFL history. So he's gonna get his rocks off regardless.
Right. I mean, you can't shut him down. You can contain him.
Exactly. You can only contain him. And pretty much that's what they did. He didn't get off for a lot of big games. He had a couple through the middle. That's what he does. But for the most part, I mean, I would think, all things considered, I'd say Levante David did a great job. But my point is that that's what Matt Milano was supposed to do, against Kelsey. That was his time to shine, and just to go back to your point about juice, I mean, I don't know if we're going to see a scenario where the Chiefs lose both their tackles. I don't think that was like a once, I'm not going to say once in a lifetime, but that's just a freak thing that happened where they lost both their tackles, and it hurts. I mean, we've talked about it on this podcast before, how important, pass protection is for a quarterback. And that pass protection was not there for Mahomes in the Super Bowl, and you see what it does. It makes a great quarterback look less than average. And if the Bills got a pass rush or got more athletes or more juice, like you said, on their defense, I think that they can have a defense very similar to Tampa Bay if they just go away from, we got to get all guys that's like fundamentally sound and, use your coaches. I mean, we always talk about, how great the Bills coaches are. Let's coach these guys that are super athletic but with not as good technique. Let's coach these guys up, and I think someone said on another podcast that, the Bills go with, and Brandon Beane, they go with guys that they're comfortable with, and I would like to see them go away from that strategy.
Sure. And I think, too, when I was watching the Bills-Chiefs game, my thought was, going back to the pass rushes, I don't want the Bills to be afraid to be aggressive. Like, I understand you can't bring 7 because then Mahomes is certainly going to hit those passes, but you can't be afraid to, maybe bring 5 occasionally, or as several different people have pointed out, bring 4, but bring them from unexpected places.
Yeah.
Like, you can't just sit back and be like, man, I hope he doesn't beat us. I hope he doesn't beat us. Chase that guy out. He's not immortal, as you saw. Like, he can be rattled. And, I mean, in fairness, he did hit 2 guys in the face and they dropped passes, so that certainly helps, if you're on the defensive side of the ball. But can't be afraid to go after him. You can't sit back and say, man, I hope we can get a couple stops here and there, and then Josh and the offense can carry us. I think that you just got to go get them.
Absolutely. I can't agree with you more. They have to have a more aggressive approach on defense. Now, offense, I don't think it gets more aggressive than what Brian Dable does on a game-to-game basis, but they have to get more aggressive, and they have to change their philosophy when it comes to drafting defensive players. I think that Tremaine Edmonds is a good piece, and I think he's gonna have a better year next year. I mean, coupled with the fact he won't be hurt and all that, but he is a guy that I think, can take this defense to being a great defense, but it's all contingent on him taking the next step forward. But again, to go back to the Bills need athletes podium, that is my crying song. Like, they need more athletes on this defense. Poyer and Hyde are straight. Those are 2 Pro Bowl safeties, very smart. They know what to do in pretty much every situation, so they're good. They can play fast. Trey White, we can talk about him another time. I'm more than willing to go to discuss him in depthly, but that cornerback 2, cornerback 3, even 4 or 5, because you need DBs. You have to throw resources at DB. They need to get more juice.
And you can have Trey as number 1.
Yeah.
Which maybe, and he's not the most athletic guy, and he doesn't run like a 4.240, but you can have Trey as your number 1 if you've got a really athletic guy at cornerback 2.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You know what I mean? Like, right. I mean, or in the slot or in this whatever role Milano, whether they're going to, keep him or they're going to let him go and go obviously they're going to get a guy with a similar skill set, whether that's in free agency or the draft, or maybe they go to like a more 3 safety kind of look. But you need athletes. Like, I know we're like beating this thing to death here a little bit on the athlete.
It is what
thing.
it is.
Right. And that's the thing. Yeah, I mean, Trey White isn't a bad player, but you can accentuate him and make him an even better player if you've got more athletic guys around him as well.
Oh, I was just going to say, going to Trey White, just piggybacking off what you were saying, like, I was watching this tape last week and I was trying to, figure out why I felt the way that I felt. I wanted to make sure I had some type of basis for what I was talking about. And so I watched the Seahawks game, right? And then I watched the Broncos game. So I watched him go against DK Metcalf. And again, everyone can sit here and say, DK does that against everybody, all this extra stuff. DK is a great player, physical freak, probably the freakiest, athlete that we have in the NFL. But, those are the top guys. And now he is paid like a top guy to cover those guys. He sits back. See, Trey White sits back there in zone all the time, and people don't really throw at him. I'll give Bills Mafia this stat. Trey White has the highest coverage grade in third quarters this year. at 96.9. I think it is something like that. So I'll give you that. He plays well in the third quarter per the stats. But when you ask him to cover a top receiver man to man, it's just not there. It's not there. And it was there. It wasn't there with DK, and it wasn't there for Jerry Jeudy, a rookie who was killing him on a double move. Like, this is not the stuff that I'm saying I feel. This is stuff that's on tape. So I just urge Bills Mafia to go watch the tape when you look at Trey White and ask yourself, does this look like an all-pro corner to you? That's all I ask.
Yeah, and I would say that I got that feeling about him in the Rams game. You know, a lot of those short crossers, that horizontal stuff. I think the whole team struggled with it, but certainly I was like, oh man, Trey is not doing well, you know, today during that game as I saw that. And I think I thought about it a lot more. And I think that, you know, last year, I think he's best when, as you said, he can sit back in zone. I think he's really good at, you know, anticipating and reading the quarterback's eyes. And I think he's great when he can break on a route. But sure, he's not Deion Sanders, that level of athlete. So why don't we move over to the offensive side of the ball? Because even though the Bills scored 501 points this year, there's certainly things that they could get better at. And one of them is the run game. And obviously there's different ways you can get better at the run game. Some people think that the running backs are too slow. And so by the time Singletary and Moss get to the hole, because they're slow, the holes are not there. There's other people who believe that they're not running the right schemes in terms of the blocking schemes. And there's other people who believe that the offensive linemen just need to get better. Where do you fall in on that? Because I'm not sure. I think it might be a little of all three. But is there one thing that you can kind of look at and say, if the Bills did this, that would improve it enough? Or is it just a combination of a bunch of different factors?
So I had the privilege of watching the Bills O-line work for PFF. I had the privilege of watching their O-line for like the first 6 to 7 weeks, you know, of the season. And so I was able to look at every pass blocking snap and every run blocking snap. So what I'll say to the offensive lineman truthers, the ones who say, oh, we need to get better at, I agree. They do need to get better at guard, and they can stand to upgrade both those positions. I will say that it has been a revolving door at guard. But I must say, from what I've seen on tape, and that's the thing, it's different. I don't want to make my point too long, but I just want to throw this in. It's different watching it from A22 film than it is you guys watching it from sideline view and broadcast.
Yes.
It's way different.
Friend.
And I know you guys think you guys know everything, and you've watched. Somebody told me today, oh, I've watched every snap from the Bills. But did you watch it from A22, where you can see everybody else? You can see the blocking schemes. You can see if they're winning or losing. You guys like Cover One. Go watch their breakdowns. Go watch what they do. They analyze stuff from A22. Go watch it and tell me. To answer your question, Charlie, I'm kind of I don't know. I honestly don't know where I fall, because I've watched the O-line, and they're not as bad as people make them out to be. When in terms of run, did they get whipped against the Chiefs? Yes, they did. But for the better part of the year, they haven't been getting whipped. I would just say, for me, it's more of that they don't run enough. They're an efficient running team. They were the 13th best run team this year, as graded by PFF. So, I mean, they can run the ball. They just don't run the ball. So when you abandon it so early, when you only run one time per half or 2 times per half, or you run it 3 times in a row and you don't go back to it again, yeah, your offensive linemen are not going to look the best. I think the most times they ran it in a row was the Pittsburgh game when they had to bleed the clock out.
Right.
You know, so take this stuff in consideration. So to go to yes, they can stand to upgrade, you know, the guard position, but I think it's a culmination of things. They need to run the ball more to be in more of a rhythm, because it's a lot of it is rhythm. They're best at zone running. That's by stats. They're best at zone running. You know what I mean? And zone running is all about, you know, angles and things of that nature. You know what I mean? And so you gotta do it more to be more consistent at it. And I just think that's their issue.
Yeah, and not to get too far off on a tangent here, but there was something else that I kind of popped into my head when I was watching, I believe it was the Chiefs, and then after reading, some of the analysis by people who are smarter than me, like Eric Turner, like you mentioned from Cover One, and things like that, and they really started mentioning how the Chiefs were able to rotate those three safeties in, or play them all at the same time, and I was wondering, like I understand the NFL is a passing league, and I love that the Bills throw the ball a lot because it's refreshing. I wonder if one of the ways to beat the Chiefs is like go to like something real traditional.
Yes.
Like a fullback, the I formation, a tight end, and 2 wide receivers. Because then they got to take those safeties off the field.
Yep.
And put linebackers on. And quite frankly, I can't name a linebacker on the Chiefs, and maybe they're all fantastic too. But if this 3 safety system is what killed us, take the safeties off the field. Yeah. Make them take the safeties off the field. Go sign that kid from San Francisco, fullback. I mean, if that's what it's going to take,
use check.
Yeah, if that's what it's going to take, and I'm not saying run that system every single game, but have it as a tool in your toolbox.
Exactly, and you're speaking to a point that is always made about the run game from an analytical perspective. Is you don't have to run the ball 30 times a game to be effective, but you just need to effectively run when you do run, like what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers did in the Super Bowl. I mean, they ran it enough. They were running, and then on top of that, you see how important it is to have a tight end that can block. Look how many times they ran like an off tackle play, but it was Gronk that was that tackle essentially. And they ran, and then it was Leonard Fournette one-on-one with a cornerback. You know what I mean? It's like when you run, you need to be effective when you run, and the Bills don't stick with the run enough to be effective, if people understand what I'm saying. So we don't really get to see it because Dable don't call a lot of runs. I mean, they won a playoff game when he called one run in one half. Like, think about that. There's no balance for this team at all. And I've been on, the other network that Charlie was on. I said many times, the Bills' lack of balance will come back to bite them. And that is what happens. That is the issue with the Bills, their lack of balance.
Exactly. And I'm glad that you raised the point of we don't necessarily mean run it 30 times and throw it 30 times. But as you saw, Tampa Bay, I think their first running play, they got like 8 yards. And I was like, oh, my God. And then another 8 yards and then another. And I'm like, wow, okay. That's the thing. Like, if they had gotten stoned 3 or 4 times in a row, you're gonna see more pass plays from Tampa Bay, but they won the one-on-one matchups, if you will, up front. They schemed it to, as you said, where they're on an outside run, it's Leonard Fournette against the cornerback.
Yeah,
good coaching, good play out of the offensive line and the tight end, and I think that kind of brings us to the next point where I had mentioned Tom Brady. Channel your inner Tom Brady. I say this all the time. Tom Brady slaughtered the Buffalo Bills and the rest of the league by throwing 2-yard passes. I went back one time and I charted Tom Brady's throws. It was when Randy Moss was on the team, and I think this is the game where the Bills were like ahead, and it might have been like the Leotis McKelvin fumble. And Tom Brady threw like 50 passes, and like 35 of them were within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage or behind it. How many times did we see him throw to Julian Edelman or James White and Kevin Falk, and they slither through for 7 yards after he's throwing a screen pass to him in the backfield? And I watched them. That Tampa did the same thing. They're doing these little rollouts and screens to Gronk, and it's like, and the Bills did some of that with Dawson Knox, and then they just like stopped doing it.
Yep.
And I think people talk about Josh, and they talk about he's such a great individual worker in the offseason. First, he improved in the intermediate area. And then this year he improved his long ball. And people are talking about, well, what should Josh improve? And my answer is checking the ball down.
Absolutely.
I want them to lock him in a room and force him to watch New England Patriots film for 6 months and be like, look, throw the ball to, and I understand Singletary dropped, but throw the ball to Zach Moss, throw it to Dawson Knox on these little little pass plays, man. You don't have to look for Stephon Diggs 27 yards down the field in every play.
Absolutely. I am 100% with you there. I have talked many times on this same podcast about the maturation of watching the maturation of your quarterback. I feel Bills Mafia does not hold Josh Allen accountable for the maturation, the mental part of his maturation. I mean, you guys love when he, sprints around and stiff arms 5 defensive linemen and makes a good throw. Yeah, that's all cool. But once he starts progressing and these defensive coaches start catching up to how he plays and learning his tendencies, he's going to get seriously hurt doing that stuff. So as to Charlie's point, you can protect yourself by doing what Tom Brady does. The Bills could have executed that same game plan that the Tampa Bay did. They could have executed that same game plan. Run the ball, play action. They could have executed the same exact game plan. Run comebacks and hitch routes with Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs has the most yards this year on hitches and comeback routes. So, I mean, that's a route that he specializes in. But they could have done that, but they didn't do that. But to go back to the maturation part, I mentioned that Josh and Lamar Jackson both had the lowest check down percentage since they entered the NFL. They came in the same year, obviously. They do not check the ball down. They try to stiff arm linemen and try to run around them, but Bills Mafia, whoever, like you said, coaches, whoever, they need to hold Josh more accountable for the mental part of the game, for taking the check downs, for not trying to get a big play. And you saw some of that this year. I mean, he took some steps, but we need more steps because now we see that you're able to do the things that need to be done to change your game. He has changed his game. He's more accurate now from a clean pocket. That's what we wanted to see. Number 1 in the league this year. So now we need him to be safer with the ball and his body. And that is the next step of the evolution of Josh Allen.
Yeah. And I love the Bills. I never like it when they lose, but in a way, I'm glad they lost the way they lost to the Chiefs. And I'm hoping that at least some of them, I know players don't like to watch the Super Bowl, but I hope some of them watch the Super Bowl. Because I think, and I know this is a little cliche, but you can learn more from adversity and a loss than you can from a win. It happened last year with the Houston game. So losing this way to the Chiefs, I hope that it does the same thing that the Houston loss did last year. Let's give Josh credit. Josh has made advancements. He has gone farther than I think anyone thought he would, and I don't think that there is any way that you can deny that. And I don't think he's reached his ceiling. But at the same time, it doesn't mean he's going to reach his ceiling. Player progression is not linear.
No.
But Josh has proved that he's willing to get better, and he's proved that he can get better. So I hope that he attacks this with the same passion. I hope he realizes that he's got to control that inner monster within him, that YOLO Josh. And it's just like, just take the check down, man. Just take it. So I hope that he retains this bitterness. I hope it fuels him the way that the Houston game seemed to before. Because if he does that, I think there's no reason to assume that he will not get better, because he's shown that he can get better in the offseason.
Absolutely. He has shown that he is willing to put in the work. Now, again, like I said before, we need to see those next steps. We need to see the top 5 maturation of Josh. I think he's in the top 5 of quarterbacks right now, but we need to see him legitimately take that by the reins and be that top 5 quarterback you need to be. And the one part of the game that most quarterbacks, or the best quarterbacks, master is the mental part of the game. That is the part that Josh, I'm not saying he's lacking it, it's just not as strong as it needs to be. I hope that he is watching film of Aaron Rodgers, because they don't have the same type of build, physically, but their games are very similar. Aaron isn't a guy that runs, a ton, and he doesn't, evade a lot of people. Aaron, if people understand what I'm saying, Aaron runs to pass. He doesn't just run to run. He runs to buy time to find people down the field. And if he has to take a check down, he will. And Josh needs to, get a firm grasp of that. Taking the smart play instead of like you said, the YOLO Josh plays. That is the next step of maturation for him. So he should me personally, if I was to give him some advice, if he comes across this podcast,
Oh, he always listens.
Right. I would hope that he will watch some tape of Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady and see how important it is to take the check down and take the easy throw and know that you don't have to stiff arm 5 linemen to always make a great play.
I think sort of getting back into more of a general discussion about something we mentioned earlier, Matt Milano, and we got free agency coming up. We're going to get into that. As I mentioned, we're going to have some people coming on. I don't know if it will always be on Thursday. It might be different days. And obviously the draft, which is really big for everybody. Early thoughts on Matt Milano. I think I mentioned the last time we were on 2 weeks ago that Brandon Beane is talking about Milano the same way for me that he talked about Jordan Phillips. Like, I mean, we'd love to have you back, but you've earned your right to, check out free agency. And you mentioned that he kind of was supposed to, check Kelsey, and he didn't do the best job ever. He didn't cover him once. No, right. He didn't cover him once. What's your feeling on Milano? Because I feel like that's a skill set that the draft is kind of littered with those guys now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
they kind of seem to be everywhere. So, I mean, do they let Milano go? And
I wrote an article about this that is on the coldfrontreport.com about pay Darrell Williams and let Milano walk. I most certainly think that they need to let Milano walk. Number one, because of the price tag that's going to come with that. If he was to test the market, he would get a deal that's like close to $45 million. And if I'm not mistaken, if after the Bills cut those 3D linemen that they signed in 1-year contracts, they will only have $20 million in space. So therefore, I am not investing more than half the cap space into a coverage linebacker who cannot tackle. And that leads me to my second point. Linebacker at the core and the basis of the position is diagnosing plays and tackling. That is the core of playing linebacker. He does not tackle well at all. And again, as I said again on this podcast, I'm going to say it again because I want Bills Mafia to know this stuff. I want them to know some of this analytical stuff. He has a 16% missed tackle percentage for his career. He has led the Bills in missed tackles 2 out of the 3 seasons. He's been healthy. This year he didn't do it because he was hurt. So, but 2 out of 3 seasons he has led the Bills in missed tackles. And the best linebackers in the league who lead in PFF tackling grade are only missing 7% of their tackles for their career, and he's missing 16. So I can't justify giving someone who can't tackle, $45 million. Yes, he can cover like a savage, and I will always say that. He has great cover skills. But what turned me off is when he did not cover Kelsey. Now, like I said, covering Kelsey is not an impossible task, but it's tough. But if he was this great coverage linebacker, as Bills Mafia says that he is, that would have been his time to shine. And since he did not do that, that puts a sour taste in my mouth. And also leading me to my last point, Bills Mafia, and I urge you, and like I said, I say a lot of stuff that's unpopular, but you guys have to stop, using the fact that you guys love these players as people and stuff like that, and then mixing that over with the actual play on the field. Because if you suck on the field, but I like you as a player, you still suck as a player, and that's the thing with Bills Mafia. If I like you, if you're a fan favorite, then that means that you should get paid, and that's not the case, because I'm pretty sure everyone in Bills Mafia wants to win football games. And as I mentioned in my article about the coverage linebacker, you do not need a coverage linebacker to win a Super Bowl, but you do need pass protection to win in a Super Bowl. So those are my 3 main points as to why I don't think Milano should be back with the team, and they should definitely let him test free agency.
Man, we're really sort of fitting into the name of the Bills brawl today. We're poking the Bills Mafia bear, though.
Yes,
we're brawling with the Mafia here.
Hey, listen, at eDaniel77, please come at me with all this smoke, because I'm ready for it. I say objective analysis of these players. I'm not gonna say what you want to hear. I'm gonna do objective analysis. And that's the objective analysis of Milano. I mean, he's a great coverage guy, but he can't tackle. And I'm not paying him $45 million. If he could do both at a reasonable rate, then we could talk. But I'm trying to win a Super Bowl. And Bills Mafia, I'm pretty sure y'all want to win a Super Bowl too. So
And like I said, there's guys with those skill sets, right? Whether it's Hamza or Owusu Koromoa, Surratt. I mean, you've watched more of these guys than I have, but I mean, I'm not saying that every single guy is a great athlete and can cover at the linebacker position, but there's a bunch out there.
Yeah. I'm right with you. In the draft, I think they should get one of those hybrid safety. They're already running big nickel all year anyway. And like you said, it worked for the better part of the year for the Chiefs on defense. So I don't see why the Bills couldn't run the same 3 safety strategy. I would actually love that. There is a guy from UCF named Richie Grant who is a safety who can cover, and he is very instinctual. And when you're looking for safeties, DBs in general, you want instinctive DBs who can go, know when to break on the ball, know how to see routes. And this kid, Richie Grant, does that. There's a game against Stanford. And if anyone knows anything about Stanford's personnel, they like to get a lot of big tight ends. Your Caden Stevensons that are in the league, Kobe Fleeners, guys like that. They like their big tight ends. And he played those tight ends really well. So am interested to see, and I would love to see him on the Bills defense, watch him grow, watch him roam around the field and make plays for this Bills defense and get a lot of turnovers, because that's what the Bills lack. A guy that can get turnovers. Yes, Teron Johnson had 2 pick sixes in the last 4 weeks. I get it, but I mean, he was not doing that all year. And I think they should bring in a guy who specializes in that.
Yeah, I think so. And I think we've mentioned certainly the 3 safety thing and how are the Bills going to, I don't almost want to say like mimic the Bucs and the Chiefs. What are they going to do? And I was really encouraged about Sean McDermott and his philosophy. And I think he made some good points where a lot of times teams want to just say, okay, well, let's run it back, right? We got this far. Let's run it back. And I was really encouraged where he said, hey, you've got to reevaluate yourself every year. And you may have to get rid of this and change this and do this differently. Now, will they? We'll see. Yep. But I was encouraged by his willingness to really say what he means. And I know he believes that every year is a new year, and maybe the Bills have to play more man-to-man next year, depending on whether or not they get the athletes to do that or whatever. So that was encouraging. And we're going to get into that more, obviously, with some guests that we got coming up. But yeah, I'm encouraged by the mentality of the leadership on the team as well.
Oh, the leadership is always strong. I mean, Coach McDermott, he got them to the playoffs when they were not a good team. I was telling people before this season started. I mean, the Bills have been to the playoffs 2 of the last 3 years. And everybody were panicking about the Bills and they were panicking about Josh. I was like, I mean, everything's going to be all right because McDermott is a solid coach. And you guys see how good it is to have a solid coaching staff around you. The Brian Dables, the Leslie Frazier's, the Chad Halls. Like these guys that, you can rely upon and lean on to make good decisions. So the leadership is always on. And in Brandon Beane, his wizardry in free agency in the draft, he has shown they've shown that they are able to work together. We see a lot of see how important it is to have organizational structure, and we see how important that is these days. Look no further than the example of Deshaun Watson, of how his organization has treated him, and God forbid that an organization like the Bills would treat Josh Allen like that. But my point is that you see how important organizational structure matters from the Pagulas on down. So I mean, the Bills' leadership has always been strong, and we see it, game in and game out, how consistent they are together as a holistic unit.
Yeah, I think so, and that's kind of playing into something that we can get into a different time. But one of my strongest beliefs is owners are too impatient. You got to let it cook. Now you have to let it cook with the right guy. It's not going to be Dick Duran, but still, I feel like a lot of things that go wrong with teams, and I just watched Sean McDermott's appearance on the Pat McAfee show, and he kind of said this. He came right out and said this, that you see the relationship between the coach, the GM, the owner kind of disintegrate. And his context was more of, they had asked him, about his relationship with Bean and why they're so close and that kind of a thing. But we see it all the time, right? We saw it with the Jets, with the Adam Gase thing, and they're not on the same page, and there's rivalries, and who knows, whatever is going on down in Houston. Who even know? I don't even know what's going on. That's crazy. But you see all these things, like the Eagles. Howie Roseman is suddenly the villain. And maybe he's been the villain all along and we didn't know it. Yeah. But having the right guys in place and then letting them put in their program and not being so like, oh my, I got to sell tickets, let's make it entertaining. I think that's just so important. And I think owners are just so not always great at that. And I think that's where you get into all these different problems that these other franchises have. And the Bills had those problems, let's be honest. But now they don't. And that leadership is just so important.
Organizational structure matters. When people talk about going to a great organization, this is the type of things that they talk about. You mentioned Howie Roseman. Was he the deciding factor into that Week 17 game when they pulled Jalen Hurts for I forgot what the backup quarterback name is.
Oh yeah. Oh, I don't remember either.
Yeah, I don't remember what it's. Oh, Sudfeld. Nate.
Yeah,
Sudfeld.
Yeah. Okay.
What was he deciding factor there? It's stuff like that shows up from an organizational perspective that matters during games. And Bills Mafia is blessed to have a owner, a GM, and a coach that all get along and that all have a holistic and a unified vision. And like I said, organizational structure matters. And one of the things I'll refer to, one of the most hated people in media, Colin Cowherd, he says it all the time. If you have a quarterback, coach, and good GM and owner, you're going to win games. And I believe that wholeheartedly. I didn't think about it at first, but he's right. If you got a good owner, good GM, and then a good coach, you can find a good quarterback, and then everything else will fall in place. So Bills Mafia is definitely blessed with great organizational structure.
Right. And I think that's such a treat because of, how long it had been. When Ralph got older and Tom Donahoe thing, I think really affected him and he got started, I call it owning scared, like going back to people he trusts who maybe aren't perfect for the job. As much as I love Marv Levy, I'm not sure that he's right for the general manager position and things like that. But that's another conversation for another day.
Mike Renner from PFF draft analyst Mike Renner had this tweet, and I want to know what Bills Mafia thinks of it, and I want to know what Charlie thinks of it. But again, my Twitter handle is @edaniel77, and I want to hear your thoughts. So I want you guys to hear this draft analysis that he had. So he said, of the 20 highest graded edge rushers last season per PFF, 15 were first round picks, not the position to wait to address in day 2 or 3. So I want to know, Charlie, what is your thoughts on that? And based on that, and those are some tough, stats to kind of swallow when you think about the Bills' needs. I know everyone's on pass rusher, but I'm from the which one do you weigh more, coverage or pass rush? And I kind of want to go corner first round, but I mean, when you hear those stats like that, it gives you cause for pause. Like, man, should I go with an edge rusher in this class? Because I know the edge rusher class this year is very top heavy. There isn't a bunch of edge rushers. So, Charlie, I'm interested to hear what you think about that.
Yeah, and I've been kind of torn with that, especially after watching these last 2 football games that we've been talking about. But I agree, and my reason is going to sound silly, maybe, but I ran so many simulations last year on mock draft machines, and I've already run a bunch this year, and then just obviously watching the draft for as many years as I've watched it. If you are not getting a defensive lineman in, the first 36 picks, there's not going to be one there for you. I mean, not one that can come in and maybe make an immediate impact. There just isn't. And I'm not saying that maybe every single one of those guys even deserves theoretically to go where they go. It's like quarterback, right? If there was no such thing as positional value and every single position was valued the same, there wouldn't be 4 quarterbacks that are going to go in the top 5 this year. People, if you ask every draft expert, for whatever that's worth, who's in the media, where they had Josh Allen just as a ranking, not because he's a quarterback, they're going to tell you he was a 3rd or 4th round prospect for most of those guys. But obviously they mock him in the 1st round because they know quarterbacks are valuable. It's the same thing. The NFL values pass rushers. So they're going to take guys in the 1st round. So if you don't get somebody, you're looking at a developmental prospect on day 2, maybe even perhaps much more development than a round 1. And as much as I want Hamza and I want, Caleb Farley, or, I want put your preferred name in there, the kid from Syracuse, whoever it is, I think that it's easier to get a coverage guy who can come in and contribute later on than it is a defensive lineman. So I think you're almost like pigeonholed into, if you don't have one, you need to draft one early.
I think I am going to disagree a tad bit, but I have an alternate scenario for Bills Mafia. Here's my alternate scenario, and then Charlie, you can tell me how you feel about it. So I say the Bills, this is not popular, so here I'm bracing Bills Mafia. It's not popular. So we cut all of the 1-year linemen, Addison, Butler, and who was the third?
Jefferson.
Yep. Cut all of the 1-year linemen. Cut Trent Murphy. Restructure Trey White's deal, right? It's very unpopular. No one wants to hear it. I get it. But restructure his deal. Go after Shaq Barrett or Yannick Ngakoue, right? Preferably Yannick, because if I remember correctly, the Bills don't have rushers that are standing up. They have rushers that with their hands in the dirt. Even though Shaq Barrett would be great, I love him. You see what he did in the Super Bowl, but I think I'd rather go Ngakoue just for scheme fit a little bit better, and then we'll have some better coverage for the run, because the Bills struggle with the run this year also, especially at the beginning of the year. So we do that, sign Yannick, and then we draft Asante Samuel Jr. with the first pick. That is my alternate scenario, or a corner of your choice. Fairley, Surtain. I personally want Asante Samuel Jr. because he's athletic. He's 5'10", and he has the movement skills, quick feet, patient. That's what the Bills need at cornerback too. So, Charlie, I'm interested to hear what do you think about that scenario as opposed to the one you just offered.
Yeah, I'd be fine with that. I think that the Bills need a guy who can win up front one-on-one, and I know that Jerry Hughes tends to be underrated because he doesn't have the sack numbers, but I know his pressure numbers are good.
Second in pass rush win rate.
Right. But I just think they need another guy. And I'd be fine with that if they can work it out financially. I think a lot of people would be fine with that because, everyone was on that CB2 train for like the first half of the season, and then they were kind of like, well, Levi Wallace, we gotten by with him this far, and McDermott seems to be fine with it, so we should probably just stop talking about it at this point. Yeah, I'd be fine with that. You got Starr coming back, so you've got, I think Sal Capaccio tweeted out that you've got like 7 defensive tackles, or maybe it was Greg Thompson, like signed on the roster already. So, obviously if you get rid of Butler, you'd be getting rid of one, and then Jefferson is kind of like a tweener type guy. But yeah, I think you definitely need 1 or 2 more guys at defensive end than who you have. So I'd be fine with that. I think Joe Marino was talking today how he thought that there's a possibility that Barrett gets like 25 a year. So I'm not sure that
he might have made him some money.
Yeah, but I Bills fans were all about Ngakoue too when he was having his fight with Tony Khan on Twitter. I'm fine with that actually.
Yeah, I think that is a better scenario where the Bills could win in both areas. They'll get more juice. They'll get the coverage and the juice in the DB room, and they can use their cap money wisely because they will be able to cover pass rush and coverage. So I think it would work out, for both. And so I don't think they have many holes on offense. Maybe they can stand and take another wide receiver with some juice, with some speed in the second, third round. Somebody will be there like Tutu Atwell from Louisville, who has pegged to say he might run a 4.2. So I'm pretty sure the Bills can definitely, use that type of speed in their offense. So I think they'll be straight. Maybe they can use another running back late. But I like Antonio. Yeah, but I don't like investing more resources in a running back when we've done it 2 years in a row. But they do have Antonio Williams, who play well in limited snaps.
Yeah,
so you have to keep that in remembrance. So my personal preference is for the Bills to load up on young DBs, and build their team to go after the Chiefs, because that's where the Bills are now. We're winning now. We have a window. We have a quarterback. They need to sign back Darrell Williams. That should be a priority, to get that right tackle, solidified. But Bills are in a mode where they can think of, okay, how do we beat the Chiefs? What is it? And the Bills were gifted with a game plan of how to beat them. So if the Bills don't go corner or a DB with their first pick, I would be highly pissed off. And they need to get one of these. I'm being serious. And they should get one of these, experienced pass rushers, with their cap space.
Yeah, I really like the idea of getting a proven commodity at the pass rush position. I think it would give Epinesa more time to learn and get himself right. And there's so many veterans on the back end that bringing in a young guy, I think it would go more smoothly. I guess, and like I said, we're going to talk much more about free agency and the draft in the weeks ahead. But I think my early, dream scenario would be the Ngakoue corner, day 3 running back, another speed wide receiver, a guard, and then maybe a big nickel or a younger linebacker. And if we could accomplish that in between free agency and the draft, I think that I'd consider that a pretty good offseason for the Bills.
Well, we'll definitely see. Like I said, I have the utmost faith in Brandon Beane based on what he's done in the past. So he has earned Bills Mafia's trust. With draft picks, with cap space, with free agent signings, you see that he has been able to do more with less. So again, like Charlie said, we'll be talking about more of draft and free agency later. But I mean, I am very anxious to see what Brandon Beane will pull off this offseason.
Is there anything else that we need to cover today? I know that Brian Dable has won the assistant coach of the year. Josh Allen was the DraftKings fantasy player of the year.
Oh, man.
I don't know how much we.
I mean, if you want to get into it, if you want to get into the fantasy player, I mean, we can. He did help me win a fantasy championship. Not even gonna lie.
There you go.
he showed out in the PFF fantasy league. I'm not even gonna front. Yeah, I drafted him and Dak. So I was like, you know what? One of it. He came in handy because Dak broke his ankle. So I was like, okay, now I'm rocking with Josh. I was fine with it though. I was like, I'm rocking with Josh for the rest of the year. So he definitely helped me. But and then I had tweeted something out, and I meant this in jest. I just want Bills Mafia to know this. I meant this in jest. I said Josh could brush off the snow on his car, and they would make a big deal out about it. They made a big deal about him getting two MVP votes. And I was just like, man, they make a big deal about everything he does. And I love the love that Bills Mafia shows Josh. I love it. But, man, I thought he should have got more MVP votes than 2.
Yeah. My wife and I have actually talked about this, and I feel like the love for Josh it's like the people of Buffalo have been so sort of pounded down, right? Because apparently this is the only place in America where it snows, right? So, you've got the last 25 years of hearing about how downtown is ugly and disgusting. It always snows, all this stuff about the city, and there's nothing you can really cling to. Like, the only thing you can cling to is that we have a football team and the hockey team was good some of the time. And so then, downtown starts to get redone and it looks fantastic now. We've had NCAA championship, not the Final Four, but we've had parts of the tournament here. We had the Final Four in the ice hockey, and still, all that Bills fans hear is Buffalo's not this and Buffalo's not that and whatever. And then you draft a guy like Josh, and then you start to hear everyone talk about Josh the way they talk about the city.
Yep. I said that same thing.
And so you make emotional connection to Josh, and now you have something tangible that you can defend. It's a human. So people are going to jump to his defense because he bonded with the fans quickly, and now they're saying all the same things about Josh that they used to say about the city in general, and now people have an outlet for these 25 years of anger about all the crap and the trash that people have been talking about just Western New York in general.
Yep.
And it makes people from Buffalo or Bills fans like overly sensitive now. It's like a compensation because it's like all this pent up emotion, and I think that's what it is.
Yeah, I agree 100%. The city of Buffalo as a collective is living vicariously through Josh. That is how I categorize. I said that same exact thing. And I love it. You're supposed to support your quarterback, but they support Josh to irrational levels. That's my thing. And so this brings me to my next point. And so I will leave it here. This will be a discussion for another day because I don't want to piss Bills Mafia off more than I already have. So I said, somebody asked me yesterday, they said, how do you feel about, I think it was Rico on Fanatics saying that, they should entertain getting Deshaun Watson, right? So I said that I don't think they should do that for 3 reasons. Number one is for what we just talked about. He has a emotional connection to the city the way no quarterback in Buffalo history has, not even Jim Kelly. Like I said, they live vicariously through Josh. And I would not want to be the GM that has to explain to Bills Mafia why they traded away Josh Allen, even though I think they will get better if they had Deshaun Watson. It will most certainly be an upgrade, but it would not upgrade, like you said, the morale of the city. It would not upgrade that locker room. There are so many reasons why that should not be entertained because you see just the speculation alone, how much, backlash it gets just for even speculating getting Josh out of Buffalo. So I definitely feel where Bills Mafia is coming from. It's just the irrationality bothers me at times.
No, I agree with that. And there's times I think that everyone in the podcasting community, because I think most of the people in the podcasting community try to be objective. And last year and the year before, it was extremely hard to be objective and not have people come at you and accuse you of not supporting Josh. And so I know there's times where that's happened to me, and I agree, and I'll say it too like this. Once Josh Allen was drafted, if the Buffalo Bills or the city of Buffalo were on the stock market, people would be buying that like crazy. It would have been like the GameStop thing. Like, got to get my shares of this Buffalo Bills. Give me some shares of Batavia because I'm loving this, And I think the fans just drink it up so much because it has been so long, and I think there's so many legends. The stories of the 90s team are almost larger than life. And so if you never experienced it yourself, you want a grasp of that, or now if you're a parent, you want to be able to share it, with your kid. And there was a lot of doubt about if that would ever happen here again, ever. I understand.
Yeah. Yeah. The buzz that Josh has brought to the city, like I said, I love to see it. I live in Rochester, New York. So obviously I've been in Western New York my whole life, and even the buzz here, it is crazy, and I love to see it. That's why I've taken an interest in the Bills. Everyone who knows me knows that I do. I'm the PFF Bills guy. So, it just helps, when you're a hometown kid, what I'm saying, you can still see, Bills Mafia joyous for a change, instead of, living in such dread because of they've endured some type of loss. It's nice to see, Bills Mafia really happy. And I wanted to touch on one more subject.
Sure.
Because it is something that popped up on Twitter. I get so much stuff from Twitter. I didn't really realize how much I actually get from Twitter. But we need to talk about briefly, and we can have another show about this. But these people came after me because they said I'm a fraudulent Bills fan because I thought that Kevin Stefanski earned Coach of the Year over Sean McDermott, and I'm going to give my reasons why. Here we go. So, first of all, I said that Kevin Stefanski had a less talented roster than the Bills do, which I think is a fact. I think the Bills roster is better than the Browns roster as a whole. The Bills have a better quarterback than the Browns do. That's a fact. Josh is currently better than Baker. That's a fact. I said, thirdly, Kevin Stefanski changed the scheme, changed the system to more of that Kirk Cousins, wide zone, play action, boot system, and Baker thrived in that system. Kevin Stefanski did that. I'm not saying he did it all alone, but, his philosophy change helped facilitate Baker Mayfield's development. And people were saying, well, he lost to the Jets, so that automatically disqualified him. Like, yo, the Jets beat the Rams too. You know what I mean? So what are we really talking about? And that shouldn't disqualify you. What he did as a whole for the Browns organization and the franchise, I think was enough to garner him Coach of the Year over McDermott in his first year, mind you.
Yeah. And I think that they're both worthy candidates.
Yes.
And maybe there's similarities. Mm-hmm. The Bills backed into the playoffs, but they did still make the playoffs that year.
Yeah.
And let's be honest. The Bills were on an upward swing heading into this year. It's not. People were predicting 10 wins, 11 wins, and a playoff berth. That was pretty widely accepted, I think, among almost anyone in the fan base. And I'm sure there is a little bit of a sentimental, emotional component to the whole lovable loser Cleveland Brown turned it around thing. We're familiar with that. Like, come on. And quite frankly, and I'll say this to people, does Sean McDermott really care?
Shouldn't care.
Why would he? Sure, it's nice to be recognized, but who cares? How is winning Coach of the Year going to affect Sean McDermott? Are they going to give the Bills extra draft picks or something? I don't, I don't see why it really matters. And I understand it matters to people probably who are listening. I'm just saying it doesn't matter to me, and I don't know if it even really matters to Kevin Stefanski or Sean McDermott either.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Why? Don't worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
He's probably going to win one when he probably doesn't deserve it.
Yeah. I think Sean McDermott has bigger fish to fry, like beating the Chiefs. We know that Sean McDermott's a great coach. Honestly, Sean McDermott should have won the Coach of the Year a couple years ago when he first got the Bills into the playoffs with Tyrod Taylor. That's when he should have won Coach of the Year.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They made the playoffs with Tyrod Taylor. That's the parallel to what Cleveland did, more or less.
Exactly. And it's Kevin Stefanski's rookie year. Rookie coach coming in here and making the playoffs. What they won? They won 11 games, if I'm not mistaken, or something like that. So, that's very impressive for a rookie coach. And like I said, his scheme change directly helped Baker develop into a better quarterback. So that is my biggest reason, because not only was he not the play caller, but he helped facilitate making a quarterback better and making that whole team better. The offensive line was the best O-line in the league this year. That is because of Stefanski and his scheme change. That was the point I'm trying to make. He had major improvements for the most important side of the football. So, if he didn't do that, I would be on the McDermott bandwagon. But, he did too much as a rookie coach to, exclude him from winning the Coach of the Year, in my opinion.
Yeah. Only one guy is going to win it. Right. Just like only one team's going to win the Super Bowl. Only one guy's going to win Coach of the Year. It's just the way it goes. I think we have reached the end of our discussion for today.
Yes, sir.
Well, I would like to thank you for co-hosting this Thursday
anytime
episode with me. Want to tell the people where they can find you real quick?
Yes, sir. As I've mentioned many times in this podcast, and I would love to hear from you guys at eDaniels77 on Twitter. I'm the PFF Bills guy, so PFF_Bills. Please go follow that page. Those are the two main places where I'm very active. So again, at eDaniels77 on Twitter. That's where you can find me.
And once again, I would like to thank the Brawl Network for bringing us in and having us do some work under the Bills Brawl banner. You can find that at Bills Brawl. You can find the Brawl Network on Twitter at Network Brawl. You can find me on Twitter at Charlie_Gross_. We got a lot of stuff coming up for you. Like I've mentioned a few times, we've got a guest booked for next week. We've got a guest booked for the week after. I'm in touch with some draft guys. I'm in touch with some of the other local podcasters. Going to maybe try and get some guys from other markets in. I have a special second segment of this podcast coming up, actually, after this segment with my man Zach Dietz from the NFL Draft Bible. We're going to tack that on to the end of this one and give you guys a double dose of the talk today. Bills Mafia, what is up? And welcome into another edition of the podcast. My name is Charlie Gross. Very happy to be here with you and very happy to have the very first episode of our weekly draft series. And my first guest today is a draft analyst for NFL Draft Bible and SI Now. Mr. Zach Dietz is with us today. Zach, how you doing?
Chucky, beautiful. What's going on, man? I'm excited. Let's talk some prospects.
Yeah, man. This is so awesome. Usually we only interact on the Slack channel, but now we're talking in person. So this is exciting for me. Yes. Okay. Well, let's get right into it. So the one thing that I think that Bills fans have been on the train since last year with Kyle Duggar and Jeremy Chin, and now realizing that it's impossible for the Bills to stop tight ends, is we're looking for a guy who can, be that big nickel, be the tight end eraser, as Joe Marino likes to say. And I believe there's a couple guys. One of them's Hamza Nasruddin, and maybe another is Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah from Notre Dame. Your thoughts on those two gentlemen?
Well, definitely. To start off with the Owusu-Koramoah, he won the Chuck Bednarik Award, Best Linebacker in the Nation for the 2020 college football season. He was just lights out for the Fighting Irish, and just his overall skill set. People worry about him that he's only 215 to 220 pounds, but he's not going to be playing Mike for you. He can rush the passer. He's phenomenal in coverage. I believe he's actually recorded close to over 100 or close to 100 coverage snaps as a slot cornerback for the Fighting Irish. And he looked phenomenal in those. I think he is a top 20 player in this class all the way. If he fell to Buffalo in that late first round, that would be a boon for you guys. Nasruddin, Florida State, we all know at the end of the 2019 season, he tore his ACL. He was able to come back for 3 games for the Seminoles this past year, and he actually looked really good. And, watching Senior Bowl tape, he looked really good, in coverage. People may worry about the injuries, stuff like that. But both those two guys, neither of them, I think, are in that Isaiah Simmons mold of blue chip prospect. But in terms of a first round player, I definitely would be excited for the Bills if either of them got them, to be honest, Charlie. I mean, they're both just Swiss Army knives that you can put on your defense, put them in a bunch of different places, and they can make plays happen.
Yeah, and I think that's really what Bills fans are looking for, because at the moment, they're kind of using Matt Milano in that a little bit, and a great point about Koramoah's weight. He'd probably be replacing Matt Milano, who's I think 6 foot, 220 himself. So he certainly isn't the biggest guy. And we've been really just in on this. Okay, how do we stop tight ends? We're going to use, 3 or 4 additional, 2 or 3 additional defensive backs. The Chiefs have certainly ridden the wave of the big safety to the Super Bowl. They use 3 quite a lot. So those are two guys who certainly got me excited about that. And I think all Bills fans have certainly been on the Hamza train pretty much since last year when he decided to go back to school. So are there any other guys, any other, linebacker, big nickel guys, maybe that aren't going to be, a top 40, 50 pick that you have your eye on?
Yeah, I got a few guys. In terms of just straight up, maybe just a linebacker, I'm a big Chaz Surratt fan. I understand he measured in with very short arms at the Senior Bowl, only 30-inch arms, I believe it was. But I just watch him on tape. I get he's an older prospect. He's going to be 24 by the time he gets drafted. But for a guy who was a quarterback up until 2 years ago, you put on the tape of Chaz Surratt, and does he miss some tackles? Yeah, but the athleticism is there, and the instincts were the most surprising thing, in my opinion. Like, this guy has a nose for diagnosing plays and different reads. Another guy in that early day 3 range that I could definitely see the Bills looking at is Pete Werner, the Ohio State. He's a pretty all-around, low ceiling, high floor type player. He could get the job done. I think that would be a very safe pick in the middle rounds. In terms of big nickel guys, kind of guys you can move around, those Swiss Army knives that I discussed before, Charlie. I'm a big fan of LSU safety linebacker hybrid Jacoby Stevens. He's like 230 pounds, but he's got that athleticism from playing safety. His hips definitely were not as stiff as I would have thought. He looks really good. And another late round option that some people are very intrigued by is Virginia Tech safety Divine Diablo, probably the coolest name in this draft class. But, he's got some athleticism. He's more of a traits guy. But, yeah, I mean, the Bills could definitely use that guy on their defense. As you said, that linebacker would drop into coverage. And if you guys are in an arms race, or if you feel that you're in an arms race with the Chiefs, these are the type of players you could draft and really make an impact on the defense for you guys, give you that step in the right direction.
Yeah, and certainly you mentioned Surratt is a bit of a project, but the Bills have shown that they're not afraid of projects. Certainly Josh Allen's a project. Dawson Knox, who was a quarterback in high school and didn't switch to tight end until he got into college, he was a project. So they certainly aren't afraid of those guys at all. And
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I think McDermott is big into the sort of the Shaq Thompson role. Like, that's kind of what makes his defense go, and he's willing to kind of, as we've seen, kind of skimp on the cornerback. Aside, opposite of Trey White, they kind of have just a revolving door of not no-name guys, but nothing to sneeze at. It's really sort of the nickel position, and that Swiss Army knife, as you said, that kind of moves the needle as far as defense. But let's switch over to the other side of the ball for a minute. You mentioned the arms race with the Chiefs, and certainly any time I think we think of an arms race with the Chiefs, we think of speed at either running back or wide receiver, just to equal what they have in Tyreek Hill. So let's start with running back. The two names that obviously are jumping out at everybody is ETN and Harris. What do you feel about those guys?
I'm sure Bills fans would not be very happy if you spent a first-round pick on Travis Etienne or Najee Harris, but at the same time, these are two first-round caliber prospects. I'm definitely higher on Najee Harris. I have him as, just on my big board, a top 15 overall player. His skill set and just how much he's improved at Alabama, man. He's kind of like an early Le'Veon Bell. Like, if you could add that to the Bills' offense with Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, I mean, that would be just an elite trio right there. ETN, I'm not as high on as Najee Harris. I think the speed is good. The vision I worry a little bit about, although the Bills could use as much speed as possible at running back, even after drafting Devin Singletary, who, despite being a smaller back, isn't really a speed demon, and Zach Moss, we know, is kind of a plotter. Another option I would definitely consider is Javonte Williams. Javonte Williams, the UNC running back, is actually my RB2, and I watch his tape. I don't know if you watch him yet, Charlie, but if
Really?
you have, tell me he's not a Nick Chubb clone. And I know that's high praise, but you put that tape on, and it took me 5 plays to be like, this is Nick Chubb. This is Nick Chubb. He is a phenomenal, phenomenal player. He could be a bell cow in the league, and he could really take your offense to the next level, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I haven't had a chance to watch him, although I know that Joe Marino is all over him, like just loves him.
He's a stud.
So what is it about ETN? And I don't mean to necessarily do a straight comparison, but is he like a little bit like a kind of like a Reggie Bush-ish in terms of like what he's not good at, maybe? Like Reggie was great around the edge. I'm not sure how great Reggie's vision and contact balance was, and things like that.
Well, I'll definitely give ETM credit. He has improved a ton in the passing game. The fumbles were a bit of a problem in 2020. If I'm not mistaken, he might have had I believe 4 or 5 of them. I brought up the vision, and you know what? When you got that speed to cut to the outside and just take it to the house, that high 4.3, low 4.4 speed for a running back, I mean, that's an elite trait. We see plenty of running backs, even Najee Harris and Javonte Williams. I think they'll run in the low 4.5s, maybe 4.52, 4.53. ETN has that advantage over them. But I just look at his frame and, just kind of the overall rawness in his game. And I feel like something that we kind of overlook at times, Charlie, is we look at all these running backs who have incredible college careers, and we're like, oh, we would take them super early. And, it kind of happened last year with DeAndre Swift and Jonathan Taylor and Cam Akers, and all those guys look good. But I think sometimes we forget that, running backs could be bust too. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I can totally see a scenario where ETN comes in. I'm not saying this player was bad at all, but if ETN came in and had a Lamar Miller type career, would he be considered a disappointment? I feel like some people think that way. So at the end of the day, ETN, he'll definitely be an electric playmaker for an offense. I just don't know if he's going to be that type of player that gets enough touches early on in his career to warrant a top 40, top 50 selection.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. And I think, since the loss to the Chiefs, a lot of Bills fans have just been like, okay, well, what do we do? Where do we go from here? And Sean McDermott kind of made the point of, okay, well, you kind of have to tear it all down, really evaluate yourself. And instead of doing what so many teams usually do, whether it's the Rams or the Falcons, where they say, okay, let's run it back. I think the Bills are saying, okay, we want to run it back with most of the same players, but how can we be different? What do we have to change to be better? What didn't work? And I think for fans, the instant reaction is, okay, well, they were, running us out of the building, right? So then you look at, okay, well, Singletary and Moss, like you said, are 4-6 guys maybe. And okay, where can we how can we put the Chiefs defense into more conflict, right? And so I think the first round running back thing is kind of bubbled to the surface, but you're right. You can get a running back in the 4th round. I mean, let's be honest. It's not a high priority position. So I certainly understand what you're saying there. Okay. All right. And moving on to another place where speed kills, and the Bills are pretty deep here, although there are rumors that they might cut John Brown for salary cap reasons. The Bills are going to need some speed at wide receiver probably. Popular name, Kadarius Toney is kind of the do everything guy that you want to take away from the Chiefs if you're really going that direction. So what are some names for you, Zach, in terms of maybe some guys, not just, they don't have to be alpha number ones necessarily, but guys who can add some speed and difference makers in the wide receiver core for the Bills?
Well, definitely. I mean, as you brought up, Charlie, I do believe the Bills are likely going to cut John Brown. They also have Andre Roberts and Isaiah McKenzie as impending free agents. So, adding a little depth, I understand, Gabe Davis looked pretty solid his rookie year. And I was a big Isaiah Hodgins fan. I understand he went on IR before he even could play a snap this season. But, in terms of adding speedy depth, you brought up Kadarius Toney. His ankles are made out of elastic, man. I mean, he is like, it is, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, just the way he jukes his players, he's got good run after the catch skills. People worry about the hands a little bit. He dropped a few passes at the Senior Bowl, but just his release and, his breaks on his routes was super impressive. Obviously, you have Rondale Moore, the Purdue guy who, his freshman season, he was phenomenal. Injuries have kind of, hurt him the last 2 years, but I definitely do think a player of his caliber that is expected to run in the low to mid 4.3s can be an enlightening player. Elijah Moore, Ole Miss, is another guy. He's more of a mid-round option, in my opinion. He's got some speed. He had a big season for Ole Miss. They use him on a lot of, screens and jet sweeps and stuff like that. He could be a nice little playmaker for you guys. But in terms of a John Brown replacement, I really think in the second round, a guy who I would love to see in this Bills offense, one of my favorite players in this draft, is a different Brown. And that would be De'Ami Brown from North Carolina. Just as a pure vertical threat, in 2019, he was great. He absolutely took A.J. Terrell to lunch when UNC played Clemson. And this year, he operated as the number one receiver in, Mac Brown's offense. And he was phenomenal. He averages over, I believe, 19 yards per reception in his college career. And, him being a vertical deep ball complement to Stephon Diggs, I mean, he would be excellent for that offense, man. I'm really excited. I think the Buffalo Bills are a top landing spot for a player of De'Ami Brown's talents.
I mean, it sounds good to me. Some people here are speculating, okay, does Gabe Davis move up, to the number 2? And maybe he does. We don't know. He's great along the sideline, but, getting more vertical threats for a guy like Josh Allen, or as you said, maybe they do get a guy who can do the things that Andre Roberts and Isaiah McKenzie can in one player, in Kadarius Toney. I wonder what your thoughts are, Tony. I saw a tweet from somebody, and I guess maybe it was during the Senior Bowl, and they said he kind of runs like he's stumbling. He's not stumbling, but he looks like he's, I don't know how to say it because I haven't watched him yet, but did you see, does he have sort of a weird gait to him?
When you bring it up like that, it's something that when you get put on the spot like that, I would have to go back and look at. It was nothing that would make me write down. It's actually funny you brought that up because, I'm actually a Florida Gator fan, and Jeremiah Moon, one of their edge defenders, is known for having duck feet. And that's one of the first things I notice when I see him on tape. But Tony, maybe he could just be, I feel like he's always ready to break an ankle, something like that. He's always on his toes ready, make a big play, which just backfire sometimes for him. Let's be honest. He's not a perfect receiver prospect. If he was, he'd be a top 10 consensus pick. But nothing really I considered on. He's got some flaws. Like I said, the hands, he's not the strongest guy, but in terms of an electric playmaker, someone who you can move all around the field. I've heard some people maybe want to stick him a running back, which I think is ludicrous. I would not do that. But, you can put him in the backfield, throw some, jet sweeps to him and stuff like that. And he would, he's just a positive player, man. He would be excellent for any offense, really.
Yeah, I did see a few of his reps at from the Senior Bowl practice, and I personally think, the Bills have probably two of the best, 14 route runners in Cole Beasley and Stephon Diggs. And when I saw Tony, I was like, oh, man, the way he gets in and out of his breaks, it's just incredible to me.
It's absurd.
Yeah, I mean, just the stuff that he can't imagine having, you know, 3 guys like that on the Bills. Just so many possibilities. Well, let's, as you mentioned, edge. Let's flip back to the defensive side of the ball. You know, Trent Murphy is gone. Mario Addison hasn't really done what they hoped he would do at edge. Jerry Hughes is still consistent, and they've got A.J. Epinesa, who's a young guy, but Jerry Hughes himself, I think, is 33. Addison's 32 or 33. So the Bills definitely, I think, or I feel that they need some more help on the edge, and whether it's a guy maybe who can create more organic pressure or just a guy to eventually take over when Hughes retires. Who this is a, I guess I would say this isn't the most top-heavy edge class from what I understand. What are your thoughts about the edge class and some guys who could fit with Buffalo?
I'm actually in the minority. I understand it's not a very, you know, top-heavy. There's no Myles Garrett, there's no Von Miller, there's no Chase Young, but the depth is actually really, really good in my opinion, Charlie. Like, there are guys in the 3rd round who I'm like, wow. Like, I feel like this edge class, if I'm looking at my rankings right now, is probably at least, I think in terms of day 1 and day 2 grades, I could see up to 15 of these guys go, up to in that 15 range of these guys going. So, you know, it's not super top heavy, but if you're looking for an edge, you know, in that 50 to like 100 range, I mean, they're going to start flying off the board. And specifically for the Buffalo Bills, I feel like they could go 2 options. You know, they kind of have their styles we see. And, you know, Mario Addison, Trent Murphy, Jerry Hughes, Epinesa, they're not really, you know, special athletes. So maybe they could use a different one for a change. A few guys, in my opinion, that I think could really look good on that Buffalo Bills defensive line. Maybe a Joseph Osai, who was a very versatile piece for the Texas Longhorns. Jason Owa is supposed to run like in the low 4.4s, which would be ridiculous for someone his size, 252 pounds. Azeez Ojulari would be pretty much the complete opposite of what Buffalo's style would be at edge. You know, I worry a little bit about his playing weight. I tweeted yesterday that, you know, I understand he'll put on weight. He's listed at 240, but if he doesn't, like, edges under 240 or way around like 240 full time, there's not really a good like modicum for like success for guys like that. And a mid-round guy, maybe Hamilcar Rashed Jr., Oregon State. He's a guy who kind of disappointed me this year. You know, he's more of a one-year wonder after having 14 sacks in 2019. He had 0 in 2020, which is a massive, massive red flag.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some guys, like, you know, more of their style, kind of like bigger guys, you know, more power. A guy in the second option who I really think Buffalo would like is maybe Boogie Basham from Wake Forest. You know, he's kind of got that. I don't know if he's going to be a 3 tech in a 3-4, but I definitely do think he could play either 4-3, you know, edge or 34 defensive end. Mid-round guy, another guy who I really like, Jordan Smith from UAB. He's a little bit of a smaller guy, but he's in that group with other small school guys, which include Ellerson Smith from Northern Iowa and Peyton Turner from Houston, who has a ton of fans, and he measured in like a hybrid at the Senior Bowl. Late round guy, someone who people really liked at the Senior Bowl. I'll just throw this name out there to end the edge discussion. Osa Odigizua, the brother of the former edge rusher from UCLA, the Giants player. I'm blanking on his name. I should have looked that up beforehand. But, you know, he looked really good at the Senior Bowl. Big, strong, athletic, quick hands. Very raw. He would definitely be like a 4th, maybe 5th round option for you guys. But there's definitely a lot of options. I don't know if Buffalo goes edge in the 1st round. I'm sure you would agree. But
Yeah, I doubt it.
Yeah, but in the second and third round, I mean, it's kind of like pick your poison because there's going to be a lot of good players in that range.
Yeah, and you're right, and I think it's a great point about their, type. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, they did cross paths while they were in Carolina with Julius Peppers. And he was obviously just a freak. Like, let's be honest, he's Julius
Yeah.
Peppers, but they've always kind of preferred the bigger, heavy-handed power guys. And there's sometimes where I'm just like, man. And now maybe Jerry Hughes isn't quite in that mold, but like, come on, man. Like, it's okay to take a guy like Von Miller. I just feel like, Sean McDermott really emphasizes on defense, especially each player only doing their 1/11th. He really wants to win on defense as a unit, and I think that that's great. And obviously they've gotten where they've gotten, but there's times where I wish that he would, be willing to kind of just take a guy who can really just win one-on-one. Another thing that came up, I think it was during Brandon Beane's press conference, he mentioned, and we'll move to the interior here a little bit. He mentioned that he felt that the Bills just didn't have enough weight on the defensive line. And part of that was that Star Lotulelei opted out due to COVID, which is fine. That's his choice. But I think that they really missed him. And so they're certainly looking to put on some weights. I think Ed Oliver has been progressing nicely, and I think they're looking at this as a breakout year for him a little bit if they can finally get him back to the position they really want him to play. But what are your thoughts on the interior class? And is there any guys maybe more like towards the late round? Because like you said, I don't know if they're going to do this in the first or second round. Guys that can help on the interior and maybe free up at Oliver a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I feel like there's a good little cluster of mid-round options for, bigger defensive tackles. To Daryl Slayton, another Florida Gator. He's around 340 pounds, but he moves very well. He could be a really good option next to Ed Oliver, open up the space for him, allow him to rush the passer more. A big riser this year, showed off some good sack production, was Bobby Brown, Texas A&M. He's got a really intriguing skill set, very long arms, very tall, just a gargantuan human being. And, I feel like he's on the pathway to being a top 100 pick if he tests really well. And the last guy who I have, I don't know if he's going to go day 2. I would highly doubt it, but definitely a big sleeper of mine is Khyiris Tonga from BYU. Just a straight-up nose tackle, big, strong. This guy he loves swatting passes. He's so active. Motor never stops. He's the type of guy that I can personally look at right now and be like, Sean McDermott would love for this guy to be on his team. Maybe he's not playing, more than 50% of snaps, but the snaps he is on the field, he's giving energy and he's being an effective football player for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what he likes, right? It's that 1/11th, he wants a rotation of defensive linemen. He wants to, go through 7-8 guys. He wants guys with energy, guys who are active. So, certainly it sounds like a lot of those guys make sense. Well, let's wrap up the discussion with the cornerback spot. And this is a spot that, people have been on the cornerback train. It feels like forever. Levi Wallace has pretty much held the job down. And I don't want to say underwhelmingly because he actually has a better coverage grade at times than Trey White, which is surprising. But he certainly isn't going to impress anybody athletically or anything like that. I think he probably runs like a 4.7 40. They've tried E.J. Gaines there. They've tried Josh Norman. So it's certainly something that I think Bills fans are really, really looking to upgrade. I don't know if the team is, but I know the fans are. So what are your thoughts there on some guys who maybe fit that sort of cover 3 zone thing that the Bills like to run?
The first thing I'll say is that I'm fully on board with Buffalo adding another cornerback in the first round. Some people don't agree with me. I'm going to throw my Draft Bible, Sports Illustrated compatriot Nick LaMattina. You know who he is, Charlie, good friend of ours. he's totally against the Bills taking a cornerback in the first round. He's a big Dane Jackson guy. But
Oh,
as you
Nick.
brought up, I know I've been trying to talk some sense into
I'll
him.
tell you before. Don't lose your train of thought. But I'm going to tell you something about Bills Mafia. Okay, and I don't know if this is how every fan base is because I'm not an expert on all the other fan bases. I'm trying to be, but I'm not. But Bills Mafia, man, they love people who come in and make one great play. It doesn't even have to be in a real game. It could be like in preseason or in like on the practice squad. They see some guy make one play and they're all in on that guy. And they're like, why hasn't he been on the roster? Why isn't he starting yet? But anyway.
Oh, yeah. No, I get that, man. Listen, Dane Jackson, he's okay. I mean, he was a 7th-round pick, right?
Yeah, and Brandon Beane is like, well, maybe – he's like, well, maybe Dane Jackson will compete for a starting job next year. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's the old saying, like, don't let good players prevent you from taking great players. And although Dane Jackson looked good in, what was it, like 150 snaps as a 7th-round pick, I don't think that, like, admonishes you from upgrading at the position. I understand the front office doesn't quite value taking quarterbacks in the first round that much, but what about a guy like Eric Stokes? Like Eric Stokes at Georgia, I know he's kind of a bit of a volatile prospect. Some people love him, some people hate him. I'm kind of in the middle, but when I put on Eric Stokes tape, I watch him, I'm like, he's long, he's tall, he's fast. He's very scheme versatile. He's projected to run. I have him timed at the school verified at a 4.38 estimation. I'm sure Bills fans would take that at the end of the first round, and he's a very safe player in my opinion. Some good day 2 options, in my personal opinion. Asante Samuel Jr., I think that would be an incredible pick. You guys could take him in the first round. And it would not bother me, the son of, obviously, Asante Samuel. He's small, but I think he could play on the outside. And the Bills fans, I don't know if you guys would be worried about starting 2 kind of small guys on the outside, but Samuel could do it. A worst-case scenario, you put him in the slot. Other guys who I, kind of like, Paulson Adebo. Stanford didn't play this past year. He's another, like volatile prospect. He's very inconsistent. Tyson Campbell's super raw, but at Georgia, Eric Stokes' teammate. He has all the physical tools you could want. He just needs to put it together. A couple of risers this year. I'll throw out 2 names for you, Charlie. Another name is Craig Newsome, and he's another guy, his tape was phenomenal this season, He's a really good zone corner. When he had limited snaps and man coverage, he was good. He displayed good ball skills, all that good jazz. And a super deep sleeper, someone who looked really, really good at the Senior Bowl, Benjamin St. Just from Minnesota. He was really good. He's a 6'3" corner. He's a little skinny, but he's got the long arms, and he could be a nice, starting option opposite Tre'Davious White on the outside. Very raw. Only has been playing football for a short period of time, maybe 2 to 3 years. But in terms of a man cover corner, cover 3, he's a guy in the mid-round who, I would trust Sean McDermott any day of the week to develop that guy into a starting caliber cornerback.
Well, yeah, man, it sounds like you've got a whole bunch of guys for us to talk about, and I certainly appreciate you doing your due diligence on this. Because there's a bunch of names there that I recognize and a bunch that I don't. So I'm excited to go watch these guys when I get the opportunity. And thanks for coming on the podcast, Zach. I really appreciate it.
No problem, Charlie. It's a pleasure. Very knowledgeable about football, passionate Bills fan. I'm sorry your season ended early. Who you want in the Super Bowl? Who you got?
Man, it's like the worst options for a Bills fan possible. It's like you don't want to root for Brady, But you don't want to root for Mahomes because you don't want him to like get another one, because then people are just going to talk about him all the time, and it's like the new Tom Brady. So I don't know. I to be honest, maybe I won't tell anyone else, but I might not watch. Like, I don't know. Like,
you gotta watch the Super Bowl,
yeah,
man.
I know, but I'm just like, I don't know. I guess Brady, because he's already done it so much that like one more doesn't really make a difference.
Yeah, might as well. I mean, I'm a little impartial. You know, me being the Giants fan that I am, we already beat Brady twice. I can't really hate the guy. But, you know, why don't we start another dynasty? I'm going with the Chiefs. I'm going with the Chiefs on Sunday, you know, despite not having their starting tackle in this whole barber shop COVID fiasco thing they have. I trust Mahomes at the end to get it done.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem to really, like, matter, right? Like, what happens, they just seem to, like, win. So,
yeah,
which is frustrating. Yeah, 'cause I'm like, we just got rid of Brady, and now we've got to deal with this guy. So,
definitely, man.
So, I know that you have somewhat recently joined the NFL Draft Bible, something that I have used many, many times over the years. And I know that I think they went from having about 4 draft guys there to having, like, it seems like 60. There's so many of you now. So why don't you let the people know where they can find your work and where they can interact with you on social media and all that stuff?
Yeah, definitely. You know, NFL Draft Bible, as some of you may have known, people listening, we recently merged with Fan Nation, powered by Sports Illustrated. Incredible opportunity for all of us, and we have an A-plus team. We're churning out content. The team covered the Senior Bowl. Unfortunately, I was working at the time. I wasn't able to, you know, do that many articles for it, but the team itself really did a good job covering all the weigh-ins, the practices, you know, giving detailed scouting reports. And we're just such good chemistry and stuff. And we have a lot planned in the future. It's a great team. You know, Rick, Ryan, Zach, all those guys over there, they do a phenomenal job. Everybody's in sync. It's a great opportunity. You can follow me on Twitter. My handle is at NFL_Dietz. That is DIETZ. And it was a pleasure being on, Charlie. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. We'll have to do it again sometime for sure, because I got a whole bunch of stuff going on. So, yeah, and thanks for coming on again. I encourage you to subscribe to the podcast, to like the podcast, to review the podcast, to tell a friend or an enemy about the podcast. Doesn't matter to me. As long as they listen, don't care. I want to thank everyone who is listening for listening. And, of course, I cannot leave you without saying, Bills Mafia, come brawl with us. We're looking for guests. Find a way to embrace your growth mindset. And until Sean McDermott unveils his newest catchphrase, trust the process.
Dawson Knox with the stiff arm, treat opponents just like his. Feliciano, Deion Dawkins block defenders like the fence. Hey, it's the Mafia. I said no one on top of us. I said no one is blocking us on top of our division, so it's clear that it's no stopping us. Google best team in the league, and we popping up. Hey, who you reppin'? What's your team? Who you reppin'? What's your team? You know I'm reppin' for my team. I got that salad on my team.